A river runs through it all right. Running through history, rolling through time, the boundary between territories and teams. Billy and Earl, Barry and Daryl, Sam and Colt, Bob and Mac. Half the crowd, crimson and cream. Half the bowl, burnt orange. Half in ecstasy, half in misery. 12 months in 4 quarters, 60 minutes for 365 days. For rank to maintain, for regard to reclaim. Boomer Sooner, hook 'em horns, high noon, deep cotton, Red River. Let it flow.
Yes, second Saturday in October means one thing around these parts. That is OU versus Texas, or Texas versus OU, depending on who you're rooting for. And if you believe the odds makers, this thing should not be much of a contest, as the Sooners come in a whopping 15.5-point favorite to dispose of Bevo. And believe it or not, this line has actually gone down, so maybe a bit of a good thing if you're a Texas fan. It did open up at 16.5 and has gone down to 15.5, but of course, the spread has meant very little in this game over the past couple of years, as Texas has outplayed Oklahoma in this rivalry 2 years ago, pasting the Sooners, and last year, really outplaying Oklahoma on both sides of the ball. It's just that OU had big plays in the game, and Texas had some costly penalties, and that's the only reason why OU got out of that game with the win, even though I really didn't think they deserved it, but they got the win regardless, and we have to wonder, entering this game, if the Sooners get outplayed for a third straight time. This will be the biggest mystery of them all, because Texas appears to not only have a weaker team compared to each of the last two, but also internal problems as well. So it would really be a shocker if Texas were able to outplay Oklahoma, regardless of the scoreboard this time. But we'll break down the matchup in a little bit. First, got to commend the Sooners coming off a victory over a top 25 team, and as a result, if you've seen the polls, hey, they're being rewarded. OU is now 9th in the coaches poll and 10th in the AP poll. So they're making that move in the polls. But of course, it's early October. A lot of football left to go. In fact, the first college football poll from the playoff committee has not even been released yet. That'll come out in a few weeks. So Sooners know that they still need to continue to make progression. And again, they still have yet to play that complete ball game this season, although for the most part, you had to like the way they looked against the Mountaineers, holding West Virginia to under 400 yards of total offense, 369 to be more precise. Skylar Howard, entering the game, by the way, had one of the highest completion percentages amongst FBS quarterbacks in the country. Well, that changed after Saturday. By the way, West Virginia's defense gave up less than 10 points per game entering last Saturday's game in Norman. That changed as well. For the Sooners, on both sides of the ball, terrific effort. The defense forcing 5 West Virginia turnovers. Devontae Bond, he had a nice game. And by the way, he had half a dozen tackles, and that was before his ankle injury. By the way, Sooner fans shouldn't have much to worry about. Yeah, he didn't come back in the game. The coaches wouldn't let him, but the ankle sprain does not appear to be serious. He should be good to go against the Longhorns. That's good because he's been one of those surprising Sooners on the defensive side of the ball. Erik Striker, double digits in tackles. I think he had a couple of sacks, a forced fumble, and he was the National Defensive Player of the Week, continuing his spectacular season. And Jordan Thomas, welcome back, Jordan. After being suspended against Tulsa, Thomas came back against West Virginia with a vengeance with a couple of interceptions. So having Jordan Thomas back doesn't hurt as far as the part of the field, the right part of the field that he defends from his corner spot. Of course, that Sanchez has the other spot. And offensively, against West Virginia, we saw Baker Mayfield. Wasn't one of his most consistent days as far as completions, but he was big when he had to be. Only threw 1 pick and had 3 touchdowns. So statistically, again, having a terrific year. Baker Mayfield doing better than anybody could have ever imagined. And, of course, he's going to be taking on a Texas team that he lost to a couple years back when he was the quarterback for the Red Raiders. So a little bit of something for him. And, of course, he's from the Austin area as well and really wasn't even considered by the Texas Longhorns. Not him or Samaje Perine, who's not far from that area as well. So for these two guys, an opportunity to face a program that really didn't think much of their worth, and they have a shot at proving otherwise come the second Saturday of October. And we mentioned that the Sooners, again, still looking for that complete ball game. And I think that's the one thing that they have to keep in mind is that there's still room for improvement. All the, so-called experts, their peers are going to be saying, yeah, you guys should just go into Dallas at the Cotton Bowl and beat the tar out of Texas. Well, that's what, a lot of people thought last year. And Texas, despite losing by 5, actually outplayed Oklahoma. And 2 years ago, all I have to do is mention one thing for any Sooner fan out there who thinks that victory is automatic this Saturday. That's right, 2013. That day, OU was a 12-point favorite, ranked 11th in the country, pretty close to what they're ranked right now. And Texas had already lost twice that year, and both losses were not very pretty at all. BYU humiliated them, and Ole Miss had a huge second half that day. As a matter of fact, that same year, Iowa State should have beat Texas before that OU game, before the Longhorns prevailed in the final minute. So what I'm trying to say was there was hardly any indication that Texas, and Case McCoy, the quarterback back then, was going to, just deliver a ferocious butt whipping on the Sooners, and we were proven otherwise. So I'm trying to tell you is that every game in football has its own identity. It truly has its own identity. And any of you who've watched my shows throughout the years, and I do have several Texas Longhorn subscribers and quite a few OU subscribers as well on my YouTube page, which I've had since 2009, I do my absolute best during my pre-games to give both teams a fair and objective review, and that's not going to change at all. So I try to look at the game from both sides. And if I'm looking at this from the Texas perspective, on one hand, they really don't stand a chance at all. On one hand, let's face it, they are not ranked in the top 100 in so many defensive categories. It's not even funny. Pass defense, rush defense, total defense, they're horrible. They are pathetic, okay? And you saw that against TCU. TCU got inside the 20, it's going to be a touchdown. Same thing with Cal, the game prior. And this program, you got to believe they'll eventually be back. Texas will be. I don't know when, but a program that's the richest in college football, a program that has as much tradition, as much money as they do, you've got to think that what they're going through right now is just a phase and not like the Kansas Jayhawks, which has been years of bad play after the Jayhawks played well, under Mangino in the late 2000s. Kansas doesn't have that deep tradition of football like Texas does. But Texas' play in recent years has not been good, and this year has been the worst of all. 1-4, firing their athletic director midway through the season, replacing their quarterback in Tyrone Swoops, who you only see now during mock time or when the Longhorns play what's similar to a Belldozer situation in which you have maybe 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1 or 4th and 2, in which you could use Swoops because of his big body in order to try to get those tough yards. It's the only time you see him now because Jerrod Heard took over the reins earlier in the year. And speaking of taking over the reins, Jay Norvell, who we'll talk about in a second, now calls plays for Texas after Sean Watson, the offensive coordinator, was demoted very early in the season. And you have some big-time friction between the upperclassmen of the Longhorns and the freshman players. You have the older players saying that the younger players, some of them, only show up on Saturday. In other words, they don't practice hard. They don't have good work ethic. And you have this fight not only going on, but you have it going on social media between the two. And it's really comical if you're not a Texas fan looking at it, okay? And nothing is comical at all is when you have a player tweeting at halftime of any football game, especially one in which you're getting to see your pants kicked by TCU 37-0, and at halftime you got a player tweeting. It's been Murphy's Law. Anything that could go wrong for Texas has. They've gotten blown out twice. They've lost a couple of heartbreakers in which if they had special teams, maybe the outcome of the games against California and Oklahoma State are different. So you look at it, on one hand, Texas, it could very well be TCU continued as far as how this game turns out, seeing how badly they got beat 50-7 and the game wasn't even that close. But on the other hand, seeing how I'm fair and objective on every team as far as what they would have to do to win, it's not possible for Texas to win this game. No, sir, no, ma'am, it's not. Texas is one of the best teams in the country when it comes to the turnover game. Okay, right now they're +5 in this area. And as we saw 2 years ago, they took advantage of the turnover game. They truly did with that defensive touchdown. I think it was a big lineman that ran one back early and that made it 10-0 Texas. That, in my opinion, set the tone for that game. You want to break momentum. You want to get your Texas crowd involved. Turnovers early on, cash them into points. You could really dictate the pace of that game because when you have momentum, you're tough. Also, too, Jay Norvell, the former OU offensive coordinator. There's no question Charlie Strong is picking at his brain these last few days, looking for anything and everything as far as weaknesses that OU has that Norvell perhaps can find and utilize against that Sooner defense. Familiarity in this case could really work into the advantage of the Longhorns because Norvell's now the play caller. Another factor, too, Deontay Foreman. This guy's an up-and-coming running back. It hasn't been the veteran at running back that we thought we were going to see in Gray. Jonathan Gray, it hasn't been his year so far. Probably been dinged up a little bit, but right now, as far as your ground attack and taking the heat off quarterback Jerrod Heard, which I'll talk about in a second, Foreman could very well be that guy. He might have been the only bright spot last week in the loss to TCU, which had nothing but negatives for the Longhorns. And you know what? Trick plays. Do things that OU's not expecting. Hey, you're 1-4. You're probably not going to a bowl game. To get to a bowl game, Longhorns are going to have to win 5 of their next 7. Still got to play Kansas State. Still got to go to West Virginia. Still got to go to Baylor. The game at Iowa State's not going to be a picnic. In other words, good luck. So, this game here, it doesn't mean that if Texas wins, all's well in Austin and all the heat's off Charlie Strong. But it could perhaps establish a beginning toward momentum that you build into next season. In my opinion, Charlie Strong's not going to get fired this year. It doesn't mean that the president of Texas, can't authorize it, but it does mean that I think he's going to get more than 2 years. Okay, he's going to get a third season now. If they're still struggling after that, then, call me and we'll talk. Because at that point, yeah, a firing could be in order. But I do think he's going to get another year. And, yeah, they've had some bad games under him. But he didn't miss that extra point against Cal. And, he didn't have head-up punter's butt when that punter, let that ball, slip off his fingers. And by the time he got it back, he shanked it out of bounds. That's not on him, okay? So part of the reliability is with the players. And that's how I feel about that. I think Charlie Strong deserves one more year. Hey, year number 3 is when Louisville took off, and we saw how Bridgewater and company did. We also saw, too, how that Louisville defense did under year number 3, and we saw them, beat Florida in that major bowl game. So am I promising a bowl game of major propriety for Texas in year number 3? No, but I am thinking that, young players as Texas has, they could very well be onto something. But if they fire Strong midway through the season, which I don't think will happen, or if they fire him at the end of the year, which I see unlikely to happen, then you're starting right back over, and it makes you look like a fool that you paid that guy $5 million a year, and you only gave him 2 years to prove his worth. So I do think he's going to get a third year, contrary to what you might think. Okay, and then for OU, it's pretty simple, okay? Protect the ball, get P. Ryan and Mixon involved in the ground game to take heat off Mayfield, and if you're the OU defense, be aware of the speed of Heard. I mean, he's going to be a guy that he might think pass, he might just take off and run, make things happen that way. So play discipline, cut the penalties down, just play Sooner football. You should be fine. Final thoughts on this game. Look, I think Texas will play with a ton of emotion in this one, more emotion than we've seen them play with all year long. And I think that emotion will make this first half entertaining and competitive, okay? Don't be surprised if it's a slim margin at halftime. I just think in the second half, late third quarter, early fourth, OU's superior talent, their speed, I just think they're going to be able to separate themselves from the Longhorns, but I do think they'll take them a little longer than many people would have thought for them to win this game. I'm going 38-17. I think OU gets the job done by 21, but I do think in the beginning Texas will play with a lot of that firepower, but that can only last for so long. Emotion can only last for so long, and I think the Sooners will wear down Texas in the fourth quarter. I'll have my post game most likely Saturday evening, so please check back with us then.